Hello, everyone. We are so excited today. We're coming to you kind of at your Thursday afternoon to give you a little encouragement. I have an old friend from a long time ago. Beth Wayland is with us today. She is an entrepreneur. She's a spiritual leader. She's a ministry dynamite personality with lots of experience. She was with Crew for a lot of years. And I still remember when God called her to step out of that and into starting her own business called With Incorporated. And what a nice word with is, because we know God is with us. So Beth, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today or later if you get
Yes.
a little bit. So glad to be with you.
So I'm so excited about what you do now and what you've learned to do, because you come out of a big ministry with Crew and you minister to students and things like that. And now you're more into deeper ministry. So soul care and things like you talked about a couple of things before we went on that I want to talk about. But I think one of the things that you've become really great at is communicating what's really real. And you talked about the igloo. So you have the igloo and you see 10% of what's really happening. But what your specialty is you help people uncover the other 90% so God can heal it, right? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think, well, when I was brand new, fresh out of college, new staff member with Crew, I just remember my first couple of years on assignment at Western Kentucky University. I was, knocking on doors, sharing my faith. And it wasn't long before I just started hiding out for in the rec room of one of the dorms, watching Days of Our Lives. And because I was so scared to keep knocking on doors, and I'm like, is this my wheelhouse? Like, what am I doing? And I just didn't know a lot of what was going on inside of me, and I didn't have much language for it. So it wasn't until a few years later that someone gave me, or it was Larry Crabb, a mentor of mine, who gave me the image of an iceberg. And so, when you think about an iceberg, you really only see about 10% of the iceberg that's above the water, and 90% of it is below the water. And that's kind of like our interior world, that there's a lot of it of ourselves that we don't know or don't know what's going on until things start to bubble up at that waterline, like hiding out in a rec room or feeling guilt or shame, or there's relational issues and you're troubled, but you can't make sense of it. And so
Yeah.
that's a sign when things start bubbling up the waterline above the surface. Let's start taking a deep dive and looking at these things. And that's usually where teams begin to bring me in.
Well, so when you think about that in a, just an everyday situation, would it be true to say that there are many families or many teams at work or many church ministry teams where they've got that, that going on where you can only really you're really only dealing with 10% of reality and the rest is all perception?
Mhm. Yeah, I'd say that's true. And I think that's why we have arguments and decisions and divisions at times too, because we're not dealing with our interior world and we don't really know how.
Yeah.
So we just go by what we can manage. And usually that's manage somebody's behavior or critique the worship or critique, this person's style of leadership. Or does that make sense versus kind of doing a more deeper dive to ask, hey, what's going on here?
And with you deal with church teams, you deal with churches. I mean, you're in ministry, and I know personally that ministry can be lonely. It can be very isolating, especially in a world of social media. You can
Yeah.
see people that have 100,000 followers and they've got all this apparent success, and you sit back and you're like, but wait, what about me, Lord? It's constantly in your face how well you're doing or not doing against those that I'm not going to even say competing with, because we should be completing each other. But how do you begin to, okay, say let's get below that 10%? I mean, people don't have the skills for that. So how do you begin to deal with the deeper things so that you can, work together?
No, that's a great question. I think you have to want to understand, how we were created, and we were created in the image of God, which is Father, Son, and Spirit. They're
Mhm.
constantly pouring out for the good of the other one. They're the only non-dysfunctional family that's ever existed. So we're invited to learn something about that kind of unity.
Oh,
And
the
figuring
only
out
non-dysfunctional family that ever existed.
yeah, that's a Trinity.
I just had to go back and read that. I love that.
Well, it's true. It's true. And so I think when you start reading even scripture through a non-behavioral lens, but a relational lens, you begin to understand some things going on in your own soul. But some of the most helpful resources to me have been even just learning to name my emotions when you know how you can be having a great day
Hmm.
and you're happy and joyful, and all of a sudden, at some point during the day, something switched, and you're just feeling kind of grumpy or irritated, but you don't know why.
Hmm.
It's good to just kind of go back and scan over your day. At what point did that something change?
Yeah.
And begin to name it and begin, call it like just an emotional scan that you're doing of yourself. Chip Dodd, he has something, he's a counselor in Nashville, Tennessee, and he has a book called Voice of the Heart. But a resource out of that book is called The Eight Core Emotions. And basically, it is, he says the eight core emotions are a lot like primary colors, that we can mix to get thousands and thousands of different emotions. But he would say, when we come down to these emotions, these are kind of the core of who we are. And so I go and I kind of do a scan of like, what am I feeling today? Well, glad, hurt, sad, shame, fear, alone, can't
Yeah.
remember the others, but you get the picture.
Yeah. But
And
and this is where I think a lot of people struggle, and I certainly do, is my feelings can lie to me.
yeah,
They can, I like to say feelings aren't facts, they're indicators.
yes,
But I don't feel like God loves me, because I didn't get, to earn that whatever it was that somebody else did. But the
yeah.
fact is he really does. So how do we align our dialogue and the ability to transfer those feelings into, okay, God says this. I mean, isn't that an important skill too?
Oh, it's significant, but I think there's a difference between Gen Xers and baby boomers versus millennials and Gen Zs when it comes to emotions.
Yeah.
Gen Zs and millennials are probably a little bit more in touch with emotion
Yeah.
and probably could use a little more structure on, hey, they don't have to dictate. Feelings can't dictate your life. They get to have a seat at the table, but they can't dictate. And with boomers and Gen X, they're pretty out of touch with emotions. So a lot of us grew up with saying, hey, you know, don't live by your emotions. So they don't even know how to even acknowledge what emotion is going on inside of them. So I'm going to push a little more on at least getting in touch because with emotions, if they're older than 40, because there's an impairment. God's like, hey, when we bring our emotions before Him, there's a gift from God in naming our sadness, and when we don't, there's an impairment, and
Yeah.
that's where it can get kind of messy. So you ask, like, what's a way we can go below the surface? That's just something very basic.
Well, and as a boomer, we didn't really grow up as, knowing our emotions. And, I came from a single mama and 5 kids. We didn't have time for emotion.
Oh no,
Just trying, we really did. We were in survival mode.
yes,
So, later in life, those emotions start bubbling out.
right.
And, how do you deal with, emotions that you don't understand? Because I think a lot of people don't understand, why do I feel frustrated? Why do I feel angry? And so how do you answer that question?
That's going to be different for every person, but it's like, are you willing to take the time and lay it out before God? One of the things you can do is even take some of the Psalms and rewrite it in your own language, just in your journaling time,
It's a great idea.
because they help teach you about what it is to be honest with yourself and honest with God, like brutally.
Yeah, and those Psalms where it says, "Why are you downcast, oh my soul? Why so disturbed within me?" God is so kind to put that in there because
Yes.
when we have those, it is such a gift to be able to say, "I am downcast," and if God put it in the Bible, then He accepts me as I am. So
Right.
you talked about, let's see, conversations that matter and 7 questions
Yes.
that help. Tell me about that. That is so just I'm so interested in hearing about that.
Well, back in 2007, the biggest game changer for me one of the biggest game changers was meeting Larry Crabb, a mentor, and he was teaching a group of us about the 7 questions of, I have them right here. I always keep them in front of me. 7 questions of spiritual theology. And basically, it's about how can you have conversations with people that really matter, that have some weight in their life, that really pauses them to think about God. Uh, and so the 7 questions are questions that God actually answers. There are so many questions that He does not answer, or He'll ask a question in response to a question.
Yeah.
But so these questions are just a framework for how to have a conversation. You're not going to like go through all these questions with someone and just say out loud, who do you think God is? Or who are we? Or, how can we join God in what He's doing? But you're going to be listening to their story, and you're going to be like, this person before me has an idea of who God is. And it might be really twisted.
Mm.
Might be really just all in their head and hasn't changed their heart or their actions or penetrated their life in a way that brings about change or where they know they're loved. And so for you to listen through that framework of who is God, what's He up to in this person's life, who are we? That's an identity issue. Who does this person, how is this person living? Are they living for a platform? Are they living as a son or daughter? Are they living as just a good ministry worker who tries hard?
Yeah.
And so that these things really matter. And so when we're listening through that lens of a 7-question framework of then it helps have significant conversations about.
Well, you said a key word there, listening.
Mhm.
We live in such a superficial world because everybody's just flying around, like hovering over little bits of everything. So
Yeah.
sometimes we don't get to the depth of what is in someone. Like a real friendship. Your friend, and much like God really knows who we are, so we might as well be vulnerable. So, what are some ways to not feel lonely? I mean, how do you seek out those kinds of friendships and those kinds of relationships where you're going a little bit deeper without just feeling like you got to be, you regurgitate your whole life? I mean, that's what's a good couple of steps that help people begin to live in that kind of life?
I mean, it's going to be risky, and I think risky to pursue coffee or lunch or someone with someone that you're kind of drawn to. And if they say no, be willing to risk again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest gift that you can give another person is your curiosity and your presence.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's Thomas Merton that says that prayer is like waiting on a word for someone, or waiting on a word that we cannot speak for ourselves. It's like waiting on a word from God. So when you're with somebody, realize it's not just you and that person, but the Holy Spirit is present.
Yeah.
And have one ear to the Spirit and one ear to that person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be laborious. It really can be just your curiosity and something that comes into mind that might seem random, and you ask.
And in that, you're communicating deeper. How important is the body language, the listening, the leaning in, the the active listening? Because we have phones where oh, sorry, got to take this, got to look at that, and it's just so distracting when you're with someone and you can't have an actual conversation, and that's just a decision, isn't it?
It's a decision. I mean, I think some part of body language and all that, you don't want to be formulaic, like you want it to be authentic. But I will say that the smartphones where you can get text a lot, and then even just research shows, the latest research, we're talking about this in the class that I teach, even just having your phone on the desk or out, even if it's turned over, changes how, the content of the conversation.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's wild. And so put it away, put it out of sight, when you're with someone. And for the love with the smartwatches, somebody's sharing their heart, and then you're looking down. For people who are real sensitive to visuals, that can shut down a conversation pretty quickly.
You know what I've done, and I get that I'm older, but I've turned off all notifications on all social media. So
brilliant.
It's so much better that I don't see that someone that I know posted on Instagram or Facebook, because first of all, that's just distracting. and it's just constant. So I do think that just going through your phone and turning off a lot of those notifications, that was very helpful to me because my phone doesn't just ding all the time because most of the time I just have it off and
Yeah.
my emergency list can get through, but
Mhm.
that helps me not be so distracted. So
Oh, that's so smart. And
so
why?
let's talk about anxiety. We've talked a little bit about loneliness and relationship, and you've got a world who's coming out of, a pandemic, and now we've got war, and everybody's feeling heavy-hearted for what's, now we can see what's really happening over in the Ukraine, and we see evil, we see just
Yeah.
ugly evil. We know that it's just horrific. How do you find the peace that surpasses understanding? Some people are like, okay, is that even a real thing? So, what do you say to people that are feeling anxious and can't quite settle that emotion down?
Mm, that's a great question. What do I say? I mean, I think for me, what I'm learning is to work it out through movement, if you can, to move your body. That helps a lot with anxiety.
Yeah,
Have a connect point
yeah,
to. I mean, honestly, I think I just ask a lot of questions. You
yeah,
know, curiosity of what are you afraid of?
yeah,
Because usually with anxiety, there's underlying emotion, and a lot of times it's fear. This is non-clinical anxiety is what I'm addressing. So
yes, yes. This is, yeah.
normal anxiety.
When
Mhm.
people are getting help for it, then they recognize that they need help for it. But this
Yeah,
is it's a general just air of what do you do with all this? And I think it's because people see things in the world and they don't know what to do. People want to help.
it's true. Well, and anxiety is contagious.
Yeah,
It's like a cold in
yeah,
a lot of ways. You can be in a group and you can be completely fine, and people come in and they're all anxious, and then everybody gets started. You find your blood pressure's going.
yeah,
So just some deep breathing, and I do think there's a loss of perspective there,
yeah,
of like, especially over the last 10 years of like, this is not our kingdom. This is not our home.
yeah.
And I think if we can keep more of an eternal perspective, that really helps us live here. But we
But
have to
in
really
that,
connect it with that. Yeah. Go ahead.
people are, and I'm life on purpose. So I like, as a coach, I like to help people figure out, okay, what is my purpose? And most of what I
Yes.
do is help people figure out what's not their purpose, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of things people are trying to do too much. So what do you say to someone? Because isn't pain a part of purpose? So when you are in pain and God is working on you, that is a productive opportunity to learn
Yes.
the heart of God, right?
Oh, 100%. We were just talking before we came on with you guys. We were talking about a lot of times that we don't necessarily realize that we're pursuing what I would call the blessed life
Yes.
or a struggle free life. And then we're disappointed,
Yeah.
because we're always going to deal with disappointment on some level. We're never going to achieve exactly what we want. So we have to deal with pain.
Hmm.
That points us to more the abundant life or life with Christ. It just gives us this perspective.
Yeah.
And usually that comes at the bottom of a dark hole of pain.
Yeah.
But pain isn't necessarily something to get rid of, it's something to embrace,
Yeah.
squeezes out the good and the gold in us for what our purpose really is.
Yeah. For me, I felt like God called me to write a book, and I thought that meant the next week I was pretty much going to be a bestseller. Like,
Yeah. Yes.
God calls you to it, then it's going to be easy, quick, and it's going to be just, all the things, right? But
Yes.
it took 20 years, and it was God. I mean, I was a completely different person by the time I wrote that book, and I was very
Yeah.
thankful I had not written it all those years before. So what do you say to the pressure of the world as opposed to the process of purpose? Because God, he's never been in a hurry.
Yeah. That's so funny because before we even got on here, the one word I wrote down is pressure.
Yeah.
I said pressure is a warning light.
Yeah.
And I think we have to constantly resist the pressure that we're always going to deal with stress. We're always going to have things that we have to deal with that are hard. But
Mhm.
pressure, uh, you need to learn where you feel it in your body. Like I feel it in my face,
Yeah.
where I'm like, okay, this person is way ahead of me in my area of what I'm doing. I feel pressure to catch up. I'm like, no, no,
Right.
deep breaths. Focus on what God has called me to do in this moment today.
Yeah.
Let's pray, Jesus, keep me close.
Yeah.
And so be aware of where you even feel the pressure
Yeah.
because we're with social media, with access to so many different platforms, you can live in pressure and always responding to things outside yourself versus being grounded and centered and anchored in the Lord and moving from that place of deep connectedness with Him. And then you move from that place of abiding,
Hmm.
rest. So,
Yeah.
rest. Does that make sense? The difference?
It does. It makes a lot of difference. And so when you're dealing with pastors, let's say
Mm-hmm.
they're working on the front lines of everybody else's anxiety and everybody else's pressure. So, how do we, as part of the body of Christ, understand to, first of all, help each other and be, more in relationship, deeper relationship than you, but to learn the skills to help each other through those moments of pressure and pain because they're just part of the world. I mean, it's a broken world. So how do we get on each other's team, so to speak, so that when we recognize, my pastor, I don't think he seems like he's as happy as he normally is, or that music worship director or the small group leader. I mean, how do we step into those conversations gently but purposefully so that we're actually helping people find that deeper level of contentment, because contentment is learned, right?
That's true. If you're specifically talking about pastors, it's going to be time and trust
Yeah.
and having them around your table and showing that you're trustworthy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times your pastor is just going to need friends outside the church. That's
Yeah.
just reality. But if you continue to show up and to encourage, and if you need to have hard conversations, pick and choose what they are. You
Hmm.
know, more and more, I'm convinced. Like if there are deep character issues, hello, listen to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill about some of those issues, or if there are deep character issues, those things need to be addressed. But if it's more peripheral issues, like your preference on his preaching style or whatnot, that I don't know that those things have to be addressed because that's just our own personal
Hmm.
wants and desires. Now, with one another, I think as much as you can share a meal
Yeah.
without an agenda
Yeah.
and with
That's important,
curiosity,
without an agenda.
without an agenda, when an agenda enters the picture, that's why people struggle so much in their small groups. When agenda enters the picture, as Larry would often say, he says, our relating stops.
Wow.
And so just to be curious,
Yeah.
it's awkward and it's going to be imperfect and it'll be messy, but we're trying. You're trying to show up and be vulnerable in real time and build trust
Wow.
and where you can share some of the deeper things in life.
That's so important, to not have an agenda and have a meal. That's like a whole new thing because, you always, I mean, if you're a planful personality, that just throws out all the things. But so let's talk about, you work with a lot of students
Mm-hmm.
and
We
you've
used to. Not anymore, but yeah,
but you work with the leaders of
I do.
who work with the students.
Yes.
So how important is it for all ages, but especially the younger people, to be very careful on the friends they choose and the influence they let into their life? I mean, that's hard.
It is hard, and I think it's just learning. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of mistakes that are made before you learn
Yeah.
who is good for you and who is not. And some of that is just going to be maturity and time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do become like our five closest friends. Do you know this? Like,
Yes.
where we spend the five people we spend the most time with is who we become most like. So I'm like, is this who you want to be in 5, 10 years? Is this who you want shaping your life?
Yeah.
And yeah, so
But what if you think you're helping shape their life? I mean, okay, I'm taking them in, I'm gonna be a good Christian to them. I mean, is it true that you can still be in relationship with someone? I guess it's just a matter of how close it is and how much time it is,
I think so.
you
I
know.
think you need to have your safe core people who, yeah, who you have things in common with, who aren't, I mean, you're not just spending your time dragging each other down. And know that there's some friendships for a season. That's hard for some people.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember having that conversation with my son because he thought all of his high school friends ever going to be his best friends forever. And
Right.
remember when he realized that just isn't true. It's just, you as you grow and you mature, then your groups and your people change, and that's a
Mm,
big part of a life on purpose because your people have to be on purpose. I mean, you have to
yeah,
choose who you let in. And somebody asked me one day, they said, yeah, but what if they're in your family? That's okay. You just don't necessarily have to take that advice, and you don't have to listen to that voice. You may have to be in relationship with them, but you can
yeah,
turn the volume down some places and up other places. Is that true?
that is 100% the truth. Because I'm not going to listen to everybody that gives me input and advice.
Yeah.
And I used to think that was unwise or meant that I was unteachable. Now I'm like, no, there are people who I know and trust, that I'm going to get their input from,
Yeah.
because I've seen how they live their life.
Yeah.
So,
That's so true. So, and you help people when they get to burnout and when they get to rock bottom, but you say that the better thing to do is recognize when you're heading to rock bottom. What are those signs?
I think signs are, goodness, you're putting way less energy into your work. You're Googling about vacations quite a good bit. You are,
Not that there's anything wrong with that. No, I'm just kidding.
you're glad when you're sick, so then you don't have to go to
Yeah,
certain events. You're really short tempered and short fused with your staff. Trying to think of what else. Your health goes
yeah,
on the back burner,
yeah.
which I've
And
had to
physical
fight for.
health is important. You said get up and move around. How important is that?
That's significant. I think my friend Beth, the day of Beth, but my friend Beth, she's so good at this. When I've really been struggling with anxiety early, especially early on in the pandemic, she's like, could you just take 30 minutes, just go outside right now, go outside and go for a walk
Yeah,
because we need to move our bodies as much as we can,
yeah.
to get out that anxiety.
I think that's such a critical part for me, and it always has served me well. So I think that's so good.
Well,
So
and the first thing that God did I mean, that's what God did with Adam and Eve in the garden. They walked.
isn't that something that's
Yeah.
so? So what else do you see as someone, then we got to wrap it up, but as someone who's out there on the front line in ministry, kind of what do you wish everybody could just know that would help take it down just a notch?
Take it down,
The
like,
anxiety and the concern and, just this level. I mean, we're supposed to be the bright lights on the, we're supposed to be the lights outshining.
yeah,
And, it's just like you said, it's so contagious to just shrink back and wait for somebody else to go fix stuff. And maybe somebody else will do something about all this. But, we have a purpose. God has us here for a time, for right now. So how do we step into that with boldness? Maybe not having all the answers, but just taking some faith in action. I mean, does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, hmm, what I would say to leaders, or what I would say is simply the pressure's off.
Yeah,
The internal pressure is off.
because we put the pressure on us, and we talked about this before. This
And
isn't,
other people.
yeah, this isn't self improvement. This is self
Yeah,
replacement. I mean, Christ comes in to live in us, so we don't have to deal with us.
that's right. Yeah, we don't want to live a life just of moral formation, but of spiritual transformation.
Yeah,
And to let God be God and do his work. We get to respond to that. And so it's going to be different for every person.
yeah,
But as much as you can, encourage your pastors. It's been a tough season, and the Barna Research Group recently released a study that quite a few will not be returning to church, or they've left the pastorate. So
that's so sad.
mhm.
That's tough. But I mean, it's the year of the ministry, I mean, you've really got to renew and refresh in the Lord a lot.
True.
You
It's true.
empty out, you got to fill up, empty out,
Mhm.
fill up. And that's intentional.
It is intentional. It has to be. Soul care is looking at our life under the care and connection of God.
Yeah.
And so
That's
we
so,
don't treat ourselves like a project. We relate with God about our life.
yeah.
And
Yeah. And if Jesus pulled away with his Father,
yes.
we need to do the same thing and,
Praise be.
listen.
Mhm.
Well, this has been good. We could talk for a long time.
Thanks for having me.
I love the whole topic of soul care, and I love that you've been so successful in going out. So tell people, how can people be in touch with you? It's withincorporated.org.
Yes, it's withincorporated.org or with_Inc. INC on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter very much, but you can find me on Instagram or at my website. And
You teach, you do retreats,
I do custom retreats for whether it's your church leadership team, ministry teams like Young Life or Crew or Navigators, or small group leaders of churches. I've done stuff with them. It's tailor made to whatever your needs are. But then the big thing that I'm doing again is a soul care trip to England in September, and so we have 4 spots left. And so we spend 2 days in England or London, 3 in Oxford, and 2 in the countryside, focusing a lot on the Inklings like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and their friendship.
Wow, that sounds, and
So
so that's just open to men and women.
women, for this time it'll be women. We're talking about doing a co-ed one at one point in the future, but we'll see. But
And you have to get some shopping in there somewhere.
there's some good shopping.
That's good therapy.
Right, that's right. Self-care, soul care, and self-care.
That's right. Self-care sometimes is as a new pair of shoes, but not often.
Yes, and we do a retreat in November at the Cove in Asheville, where for
That's
30
good.
people. So we keep our retreats small intentionally, so there can be a place for vulnerability and confidentiality.
And that's open to anybody.
That's open to anyone, not just ministry workers. And it's called Rest in the Wrestle. And all of that is on my website. So we'd love to have you. Registration's open for both, and you can always reach out to me through those outlets.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we've got the withincorporated.org in the post. So thank you. It's so good to see you again after all these years. I'm so glad you're doing what you do.
You as well.
And
buy our book, everyone.
Yeah. There you go. Well, listen, thank you, Beth. And we'll come back and do this again. Again, thanks for jumping on with me, and appreciate all you do, and Godspeed. And I hope that God blesses all these things you got coming up, and I know He will.
You as well. Bye, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to watch.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.